Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. This time, True Q. Yeah, I like this one. I think Olivia Dabo's in it. I like Olivia Dabo. Love Olivia Dabo. True Q. Also, hey, stay true to your school. And your school is It's All Been Trek Before. Stay true to us. Patreon.com/IABD. Go there, support us. Get the bonus stuff. See the video. Get the bonus stuff from the mothership. It's All Been Done Radio Hour. Patreon.com/IABD. Now, let's get real. True Q on It's All Been Trek Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. See, I'm getting the energy back in already. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And this is Keith of Trek Record.
Jimmy-Jerome. We are not going to make you fall asleep 2 weeks in a row. I feel bad about that. We just got to infuse the energy even if we're not feeling it. But this week, we probably will be feeling a little better. We're here to talk True Q, otherwise known as the Wonder Year generation or whatever. First impressions.
Well, you know, I always love Q episodes. And Steven always thinks that he's not going to, but usually ends up liking them, I think. But we'll see.
So, I'll jump off that. I did not enjoy this one as much as I thought, but I definitely did not hate it. I think there's a lot to discuss here. Q made me laugh several times again. I like the fact that it went kind of a little both ways this time. There was kind of a schism there, but that some of his stuff is still like from a God perspective, but his jokes where he's like, I'm relating this to that time where I was pretending to, I was in a human body. I think that gives him some, the insight that gives him for his jokes made me laugh several times. And also Olivia Dabo, I love. I've always loved her. And it took me a second at first. I'm like, who is this? I'm like, that's Olivia Dabo. Boom. Yeah.
I was pretty sure it was her right away, and I'm still wondering how to actually pronounce her name. I think I have heard a Diabo like that. I think I was called her Dabo in my head. But
that might be right. You might be right.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it either. But Olivia, best known for Conan the Destroyer, Point of No Return, Star Wars Episode 9, Justice League, Doom. Lots of... I don't know why it's not on the top, but the Wonder Years. Obviously, she was Kevin's older sister. It should be at the top of her
I keep
list.
telling you that the algorithm for IMDb is messed up when it does that most popular thing. It just...
I know.
No way.
The algorithm from IABD kicks the algorithm for IMBDs, but no. Star Wars Episode 9, she voiced a character that she also voiced in the Clone Wars, Luminara Unduli. It looks like she's done a lot of voice work in the last few years. Justice League, Legend of Tarzan. This is her only Trek credit, unfortunately, and she never did Seinfeld. I feel like we've now moved past the point where we're getting crossover guest stars.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing Seinfeld anymore.
It's Dabo. Google confirmed.
Olivia Dabo.
Olivia Dabo.
Whatever name she goes by, I enjoy her.
I think she's great. I think she's a good actress. I wish we'd seen her more.
This guest spot came near the end of her time on the Wonder Years, so she would have already been very familiar to TV audiences, and would have probably been considered a decent get for them in those days, because that show was hot. Yeah. We start out with her character, Amanda Rogers is her name, coming on board the Enterprise D, and she's like, I study all these sciences, I don't know which one to study, and Crusher's like, oh, we can solve that for you. Like, by the time you're done with this, and I'm like, really? She's taking all this time to consider all these things. And you're like, yeah, her brief little stay, we'll figure it out. But I like Picard's little joke about where Crusher's like, we'll figure out what you're interested in. And Picard's like, or at least what you're not interested in. It's like, oh, dude, that was such a dad joke that fell flat.
They never should have gotten rid of the laugh track.
Riker shows her to her quarters, and she makes puppies appear and disappear. That made me wonder, are they allowed to have dogs on the starship? It certainly seemed like she wanted to bring her dogs and they wouldn't let her. I don't know why you couldn't have a dog on the starship. I mean, I know in Star Trek Enterprise they do have a dog on the starship, but that's way before this. I don't know why we never see pets on the Enterprise D.
Well, they would probably need to be litter trained. Yeah.
You're telling me they don't have they couldn't just take them to the holodeck and pee in the grass and then the holodeck would just make it go away? You could take
the transporter do that? I don't know.
The transporter could beam the poop off your carpet? Absolutely. So they talk about Amanda's backstory. She is adopted, and her parents are both marine biologists for Starfleet. So I guess Dr. Gillian Taylor's marine biology program is going strong and has been absorbed into Starfleet.
Which immediately made me think of the Seinfeld episode, The Marine Biologist. On that day, my friends, I was a biologist. But
it's one of my favorite ones ever.
I thought it was really weird when the container fell on Riker. What I thought was weird was people were more surprised. Like, how often do containers just fall in your cargo bay? I figured they'd be like, really? That was strange how that fell. Let's investigate that and make sure all your containers are tied down.
I couldn't tell at first if, like, she made it happen and then fixed it at the last second. It was just weird that...
It was weird, but then when it was explained that Q did it, you're like, oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah. And of course she is a Q, we find out.
Right. Very quickly on the marine biologist Seinfeld, I missed this recently. As we all know, Shatner went into space. And Jason Alexander said, well, I guess I have to become a marine biologist now. So just while we're there. So
awesome.
I thought that was very entertaining.
That is funny. Beverly does not want Q to take her away. But then throughout this episode, her character is very inconsistent on that regard. Because she keeps saying, well, you should listen to Q and talk to Q because he knows what he's talking about. But don't listen to him and go with him because that's bad advice. She's not the only one that's kind of back and forth.
Yeah, I thought it was all it was reminiscent of, and I'll throw out Requiem from Methuselah once again. It was very definitely like, well, no, you need this guidance or this guidance. And, all that stuff was very, Q's like, I must train her. Got very into the Jedi Sith kind of thing. And then this is where Colleen jumped in with me, that a lot of Q stuff, I went with the word creepy. She went with the word rapey. I also, this is not my alternate episode, but this is my alternate title is #Q2 would be my alternate title for the episode.
Oh my God.
Because I did not like the way he was handsy with her. Like it wasn't over the top. It was, I guess it's a Biden rubbing the back kind of thing.
Oh, you're talking about when the menacing kind of, menacing might not be the right word, but that kind of like, I'm playing up my sinister thing by getting my nose like right by your ear as I'm talking and that stuff. I thought you were flashing ahead to the Riker stuff.
It also sounded like, it also reminded me of not only Jedi and Sith, Palpatine, whatever. Somehow Palpatine's back, but it also reminded me of just like a Dracula kind of thing, a seduction kind of thing, and I didn't care for any. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, I did it. There were a couple times where between her and Q or her and Riker, I was reading something into it and then just decided, no, I think this is just 80s TV and it's cheesy. I don't think it was anything.
I will say this is another not.
Well, now 90. Now we're in early 90s TV.
Yeah, I shouldn't say politically correct, but I guess I just did. But when Q says that Crusher gets more shrill with each passing year, I laughed hard on that.
I cringed. I cringed very hard on that.
It made me laugh. I know it's not right, but I also wrote, is this a meta thing that the writers were like, or meta from on high that the writers are writing her that way? I mean, I never thought her to be shrill, but he exaggerates all that stuff anyway, but I found that very funny. This was right after he mentioned vulgar human fashion, which also made me laugh.
Picard goes along with Q's plan at first, which at least he's appropriately suspicious, but still it felt like he went along with the plan pretty easy. They mentioned that her wishes have only been coming true for the past 6 months. I guess Qs are late bloomers.
Well, human Q hybrids might be.
Well, as we know,
I thought they determined she was full Q, right? Or else they were going to kill her.
I got a Charlie X vibe early on because her parents were killed. They end up blaming Q for it. But did you guys think that she had something to do with her parents dying?
No, I didn't.
No.
Okay, I went right there. I was like, oh, she's a Charlie X. Because as you recall, go back to our second episode where he killed his parents. And he was essentially, he's a Q, or he's somewhere in that continuum.
Yeah.
I try to forget that episode.
I know you do.
It should have occurred to me, but it didn't.
You're going to love my alternative episode. You're not going to love my alternative episode. But yeah, so because that's the vibe I got. It's like, oh, she killed her parents, but didn't, so maybe she's lying. It just felt like there was more going on with her. And to me, I want to say that'd be more interesting, but I'm not sure because we all saw Charlie X, so maybe it's not as interesting. But
no, I love how she throws Q. We don't get to see people beat up on Q.
Yes, that was
often.
great. And did anyone notice the very next time she's in the room, the vase and table have been replaced?
Yeah.
That's
just good guest services.
That must be the ensign from a couple episodes ago.
That's what Ensign Kane was doing.
Yeah, ensign hospitality.
I like that Picard tossed back in Q's face, though. Oh, she's just behaving like you.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot. I did actually write the line after that, after all that, after she smashes him into the vase and all that, that she might be a Palpatine somehow. And I'm still sticking with that. I'm sure J.J. Abrams is trying to figure out a way to make that a true thing by writing somehow. Sorry.
It was very strange when the Shadow started grilling Q. I guess that was supposed to be another Q and they didn't want to pay for an actor or something.
Yeah.
It would have been more fun if it was like an actual character that we followed up on later.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who voiced the Shadow. It's not on IMDb. What happened to her parents? I was bumping on that because I was like, you can't kill a Q. And yet, this will not be the last time we talk about Qs dying. So I guess you can kill a Q. They just like to pretend they're more powerful than they actually are.
Yeah.
It could be that, or I thought it was the kind of a loophole. They had taken human form or something like that. Because they kind of played up the fact that they had taken on literal human form, which is how she was born to begin with and was born human.
Yeah, I thought there was something along those lines too, Keith. And then they said the tornado happened within the
tornado, despite the fact that there is a weather net that's supposed to dissipate it, because we don't have tornadoes in the 24th century.
Right, they've eliminated that and the common cold. And I thought it was interesting when they first said weather modification net, I thought they meant like a network that modifies and keeps things stable. But then later they made it sound more like the Tholian web, an actual net that would stop it, which is also interesting. So those are a couple of things that, like, just in passing, are like, you could do an entire series on those.
Yeah.
That's one of those cool things. So I did like that.
Me too.
While we're on the climate, early on, they mention, I can't remember who does, they're talking about, I called it the Climate Change Minute, where I think it's Amanda, says, we spent all this time trying to clean these emissions up and everything. Instead of lowering them, we spent all this time coming up with things that will clean them. And I thought that was very much, especially in this time, as someone who's been around the energy industry for a while, one of the big things then was coal scrubbers and that kind of stuff. And so it was very much then, and I'm sure it still is, but the idea of, well, we don't want to stop using coal to make energy. We'll just come up with these things to scrub it so it won't be as dirty.
Yeah, just like little like grill brushes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
scrub the coal.
And that's when they started getting into carbon credits, which I know is still kind of a thing today. But I thought that was an interesting, and we've had some good climate change things, I think, snuck in is not the right word, put into these TNG episodes.
They ask Amanda if she could do anything or have anything, what would she do? I mean, that's a question I would definitely want to answer. They basically said, you have all this power. What do you want to do with it? What would be your one wish? What would be your thing you'd want to do? Beverly said she'd heal people, right? But Amanda wasn't. Yeah. What would you guys want to do if you could have a power?
It was Amanda asking Beverly a question, which
you're right. Sorry.
It made me think of the Office Space question, where it's if you had $1 million, what would you do? And it just made me think of his answer, which was nothing. I'd just sit around and do nothing.
I would quit my job and write.
Well, I guess this gets to one of the other. I feel like, and I think I've said this before, I feel like the lines with Q are very arbitrary. Like, Qs can do this, and they can't do that, can do this. Like, because I feel like the choice at the end, and I've said this in other episodes about these kind of things, but I feel like it's such a false choice of, well, you can stay here, but you can't use your Q powers, or you can go there and be the Q continuum, and then you're limited with what you can do. And it's like, why is that the choice? Why can't
it's the choice because that's what the continuum is making the choice. It's not a limitation on her powers. It's a limitation from the authority in charge.
So if she stays, they won't let her?
Right. Yes. If she stays and tries to use her powers, they're going to come and kill her like they did her parents. Yeah, that was very clear to me that was not a limitation on the powers.
Right.
And I guess that's just going back to my arbitrary lines thing. It's like, well, but why?
Why is any government rule in place?
I know we know. I mean, I know when we did the 25th, the Gene documentary, the making of TNG early seasons, that documentary, that they talked about Q as God to Gene, and that context actually helps me a little bit in that I think he's like, yeah, because I think all the rules that we talk about, whether religiously or otherwise, or just philosophically, we're like, what is the deal with this guy? His lines are arbitrary. It's like, whether you're talking to a Christian or a Buddhist or whoever you're talking to, it seems like, all right, I'm with you right to here. Now, why isn't this powerful being fixing this? Well, they work in mysterious ways. Well, yeah, you're right. That's why I'm asking these questions.
Yeah, anyway. No, I think the Q continuum's like a religion or an authoritarian. Like they have stupid arbitrary rules. They're like they want to control their members.
They should be like the Sith and have no rules.
We're going to find out more about the continuum in Voyager, but for now, I just think they seem petty and stupid in how they control things. So I didn't bump on that as a bad thing, and that just made total sense to me.
Every time
it made sense to me.
Every time we say continuum, I think of, dude, where's my car? But anyway, sorry. Go.
Yeah. You should also watch the show Continuum if you haven't. I really liked that one. And it makes sense to me that that's sort of like the trope of how like Watcher rules, essentially. If you have a collective of beings with that type of power, they're usually self-governing to the extent that they can't interfere with certain types of. It's almost like their own version of the Prime Directive. And Q, I don't know. Maybe there's some. We've seen in the past that he was being punished in some way for doing something, crossing some sort of line. Yep. But at the same time, it also seems as though he is given some sort of leeway, like he's almost there in some sort of official capacity to be able to interact with them. It would be interesting to see what those rules were or how official those things actually are. But it also occurred to me that maybe that choice that they set up for her was to demonstrate to her that she didn't belong there.
Yeah.
That her human temptations were going to be too much for her to bear. So.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think they set that up on purpose just to try to be smug and say we're better than you. Of course, we've got the influence of her liking Riker, which I kind of felt like this episode would be more interesting without that element. Like, I wanted her to just, I can't let a planet full of people die. I don't need Riker's life to hang in the balance.
Yes, I think they could have done more with that part of it.
Or not at all.
Yeah, I thought it could have been more fun, but it wasn't. Later, I think Riker says, when she pulls him into the fantasy, he says, you can't snatch people and put them in your fantasies and expect them to respond. And I responded, oh, yeah?
Yeah,
you
I was going to say. I had the same thought you were, because, I mean, one of my fantasies is being with an all-powerful girl that could do whatever.
Right.
Absolutely. But that's not Riker's fantasy, because we all know Riker is about aggressive consent. And he wants to be full equal in the relationship. He's not into the dominant women. He's into strong women, but women he can be on equal footing with, not women that have a over on him.
And maybe it makes sense that, although I don't know that she's that much older than Jonathan Frakes at this point, but that maybe she's too young, or maybe, I guess in the episode, she's an ensign. She's very young, obviously. So I feel like he rejects it out of hand rather than I feel like he goes from, this is not the way this works, to, not only is this not the way it works, it's never going to work. So, but.
Yeah, I mean, the whole gazebo scene, by the way, he is currently 69 and she's 53, so there's 16 years age difference between them. So. But the whole, when she made him go in the gazebo, I know the costumes didn't match, but I just thought, Sound of Music, I'm 16 going on 17, he's the older man. Oh, yeah. That's where my brain went, because I'm a musical guy.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I think the whole point of that, though, is to, I mean, it was to be disturbing and be a very good example of what human weakness would entail. I think realistically, that is where people's minds would go if they had that kind of unlimited powers to.
Yeah, I think the ending would have meant more if it didn't have this little crush built into it. That's all I'm saying. I don't feel like we needed it. I do wonder, though, when she zapped Riker back onto the date he was already on, did she leave him in the costume? Kind of wanted to see that. Or did she return him to his clothes?
Would have been a great story for the date.
Yeah.
Again, I was bummed how quickly she went from just sitting down with the ladies to getting into that, because I thought, oh, it might be cool to have a conversation with the ladies. It's not necessarily about a guy, but we jumped right to it. So.
The ruined experiment thing, where he sped up the experiments, they didn't get what they wanted out of it. It seemed very on the nose. Like, oh, of course, that's the twist of how it's going to turn out. Crusher and Q arguing over that, though, felt very much like a mom and dad arguing over how to parent.
Yeah,
which I really enjoyed that bit, and then Crusher briefly turning into that dog. That was fun.
Oh yeah,
the hide and seek game was fun, except I did think the exterior of the ship looked terrible in scale and effect when they were on the outside of the Enterprise.
When Amanda is working on the thing is it for Crusher? She's working in the. It looks like she's developing new Coke. It looks like Coca-Cola.
Or how much more sweeter do we make it? Add a few more drops.
Yeah.
Q mentions, and I think this was a good reminder to us, and maybe they were going ahead. I don't think they were setting up the end of the series yet, but Q reminded us the jury's still out on humanity, that that trial he started in Encounter at Farpoint has not been completed. Obviously, that's the bookend of the series. I think it's pretty well known that Encounter at Farpoint starts the trial, and the series finale completes the trial. But it's a nice reminder in season 6 of, yep, we still got to come back to that. It's not done yet. Picard calls what Q does parlor tricks. Those aren't parlor tricks. He has real power. He's not a con man.
Right.
He pushes buttons, I think.
He's not a humbug.
Oh, another funny Q joke, I thought, when Riker shows up at some point in the medical lab, he says, well, if it isn't number 2, it's a poop joke, right?
I guess it could be. I mean, he's number 1. Picard always calls him number 1.
That's
I didn't get it as a poop joke, but
Colleen said, "Isn't he number 2?" I said, "No, he's number 1." So this is definitely. I think it's a poop joke.
Could be.
And I usually wouldn't laugh at those, but in this instance, I did.
Interesting. Picard, when he's talking down to Q about, oh, you're jealous of humans because of their moral center. The way John Delancey played that, and for the record, again, I think John Delancey is a fabulous actor, and I love his performance as Q, even if the stories aren't always. This wasn't my favorite Q episode by far, but I really like the way John Delancey just sat there amused that Picard was completely off base. It's just his arrogance that has led him to this, that his hubris has led him to this conclusion that is totally wrong, but he's just going to let Picard say stuff because that's what Picard does.
It was a very season 3 Kirk speech to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a little much. I don't know if we should blame the writer. Matthew Corey, who has no other IMDb credit, was based on material by, and then it was written by Renee Echeverria.
Oh, okay.
Directed by Robert Scheer, one of our normals. So Amanda fails the final test, but then she lays down the law of, you're going to let me go visit my parents first, though, and explain this to them. And Q's like, okay. Like, it feels like there was a lot of Q posturing, and she finally just said, nah, we're dispensing with the BS. And he's like, okay, that's fine, as long as you're going to do what we want you to do in the end.
And she's going to talk to her adopted parents, right? Is that what they're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Riker says early on she's adopted. Could she be an alien? Which I'm like, that's really rude, for one.
But also,
two, yeah. It just seems, it's just continuing to put a stigma on adopted children. So
he's probably a little sensitive about aliens right now still.
I was just gonna say, I tend to believe that at least 3/4 of adopted children are actually aliens. That's just common.
By the way, isn't Riker the alien, depending on where we are?
And that's a good point.
I just feel like people in Starfleet, the flagship of Federation, should be more aware of when they talk about aliens. Who's an alien? Who is? That's what I think. Please get on board with my campaign. Send $5, $10, $15.
For just 20 cents a day, you too can help a Starfleet officer realize their hubris.
I'm starting now, so we can get a good head start. I'm starting 300 years in advance. So, yeah.
I have a bunch of fashion notes.
Fashion.
The pink suit she wore at the beginning, something we've seen very similar. It's this typical civilian clothes where it's 2 different pinks on top of each other, but it's like a whole jumpsuit thing. I did not care for it. But then she wore a green version later that was like, oh, I really like that green version. So maybe it's not the stupid jumpsuit cut. They just need to use better material. And she had the best beehive in Star Trek since Grace Lee Whitney's Rand.
Yeah, attractively.
I also liked the alien design with the 4 nostrils.
Yeah, I wrote down 4 nostrils, but he still needs an inhale. I thought that was interesting.
Well, that wasn't a nasal inhaler.
Okay. Also, well, that was my thing. Is yeah, I guess that was my thing.
I think that was more about the atmosphere he's breathing, that we didn't have the right atmosphere for him.
Also, if this guy showed up at a party where they had cocaine and people are already paranoid, they would just become so insanely paranoid. I think this is how people view regular people, that they're like, oh man, this person with 2 nostrils actually has 4. They want all my coke. That, I don't know. I've never done cocaine, but that's just my speculation.
I have not done it either.
I liked her hand motions. We're used to the classic Star Wars, these aren't the droids you're looking for kind of thing, but I did like her hand motions, which maybe as she develops as a Q, she won't need them anymore.
Who was your annoyance this week?
This won't surprise anyone. Q, I still found it very funny. Oh,
really?
Yeah, but the arbitrariness of the Q continuum, all that mumbo jumbo, because he says all that stuff with conviction. John Lance is a good actor, but I still don't believe it. It's the opposite of the issue last week. He delivers it with conviction, but it still feels empty to me just because I have issues with it. But
I'm going with Picard. I think his hubris. I think he just handled the situation wrong and thought he had the upper hand the whole time, and he did not. So
that's a good one.
Also going with Picard.
Who are you having a drink with?
Olivia DeBow is there. DeBow is there. I'm having a drink with Amanda Rogers.
Yeah, I was going for Amanda Rogers as well because, like I said, I like a woman with power.
Even if she wants to do the Pride and Prejudice fantasy, which is what Colleen called it, also what our folks at the TNG fashion Tumblr, Fashion It So, they had the same comment.
You were with Amanda, Keith?
Yeah.
I figured. Ranking the episode, better or worse than Man of the People? I say it's better.
Yeah, better. Yeah, I think so.
Unanimous.
Great. Better or worse than Realm of Fear, the Barclay episode?
Probably worse.
I agree.
Yeah. We're unanimous there too. Look at this.
3 of 6. We got that one nice and easy. Yeah, I liked that episode. I thought it was a good episode. I now think this season stands at 3 and 3, good and bad episodes. So redemption in a way. Next week, Rascals. An emergency beam out renders 4 crewmen down to childhood shortly before Renegade Ferengi take over the Enterprise and offload the adults.
All right, I'm excited about Ferengi. I forgot to mention my alternate episode was Charlotte X. What would have been my alternate episode.
Of course.
It would have just been that she is doesn't have it together, which she doesn't, but maybe more about her handling her powers. And we all did not care for Charlie's relationship with Janice Rand. Mm-hmm. And so, but maybe it would have been, I feel like at least she wasn't that bad. Amanda Rogers was not as bad as Charlie. But so when I say Charlotte X, just more of her dealing with her raging hormones and stuff, but not in the same creepy way.
I'm excited for Rascals because we're going to see kid versions of Jean-Luc Picard, Ensign Ro, Keiko O'Brien, and Guinan running around.
Is this
Picard
like Muppet Babies?
Sort of. Just the 4 of them. It's Picard and 3 of the most interesting female characters on the show. Also marks the penultimate appearances in the series for both O'Brien and Ro, who will both return for 1 episode each in the final season. But O'Brien for the series finale and Ro for just another standalone episode. So this is the end of the road of O'Brien and Ro as normal crewmen.
Oh, okay.
Which is a little sad, but like I said, we get 1 more episode each of them in the final season. So
I keep going back and saying I'm out of notes, but and maybe I already said this, but I think I've conveyed this throughout this episode, which is I like Q more as the Great Gazoo than some actual omnipotent being. I mean, I guess the Great Gazoo is. No offense, Flintstones fan, but for all you folks over it, it's all been Flintstone before. Don't get mad at me. But I like him when he's the Joker, the jokester. He makes me laugh. So.
And next week is also the penultimate appearance of Guinan. She will also return.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess we're there.
She'll also return for 1 more episode this season. She's not in the final season. Wow. And then it is the final appearance of Keiko O'Brien in The Next Generation. So we are starting to wind down a little bit as we go. But that's next week. Rascals, I'm excited. Until then, live long
in your own continuum and prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?